Hey, what do you think about clearing some space for a dance floor up in here?
I'm for it, but we're going to have to get rid of a section to do that. Which one?
Well, pretty much every shelf is important, but I was thinking maybe Canadian corporate training videos of the 80s could finally be moved to storage.
That's a hard pass for me, Bob.
Welcome to Rewind Video. I'm Bob.
I'm Rob.
And we love movies. Good ones, bad ones, old ones, new ones, big movies, small movies. Rob, I was driving into work today and couldn't help but notice the people in the car next to me while I was sitting in traffic. So I look across and I see an all-out dance party happening in the front seat. I have no idea what was on the stereo, no clue what the driver and passenger were listening to, but they're obviously feeling the music.
Music does that.
Yeah, they were owning it. Zero fucks given. Naturally, my response was to honk, roll down my window, and yell, "Eyes on the road!"
Get off the road, you maniac!
But it felt like an appropriate experience to mention, given what we're about to discuss this evening. So here at Rewind Video, you and I are charged with stocking the staff recommendation shelf. Each time we choose a selection of films for the shelf, we adhere to a theme. This week's theme is dancing.
Toe-tapping movies.
Yeah. This is your theme.
It is my theme. Yeah, this is my selection.
I can't help but to wonder, did you choose it because you are a fan of the dance, or is it something that you don't like seeing in movies?
I would say, not getting into movies, I would say I'm generally not a fan of dancing.
Okay.
I don't like dancing.
Right.
The dance floor at a wedding, for instance, is not really my scene. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily enjoy watching dancing, but in some instances, yes. In movies, a lot of times they work, and also I think it's an expression of some sort of musicality as well.
Sure.
And so when it's connected to a music that I'm really into, yes, I can get behind it.
You and your relationship with music in movies is prevalent theme in our staff recommendations selections.
It was literally a theme in our musical instruments episode.
Yeah. I think the dancing makes for captivating cinema, and I'd be surprised if our customers couldn't point to one movie that they love that doesn't feature dancing pretty prominently. You know?
I think everybody loves one dancing movie.
Yeah, and, it doesn't need to be a big dance. I mean, I don't think the movie needs to be about dancing. Sometimes there's movies like Ex Machina, for instance, that just feature a random dance scene for seemingly no apparent reason, and that's great.
I've chosen some movies that dancing is not necessarily prominent.
Okay.
But it's important.
Yeah. I actually feel that I've chosen 3 movies where dancing plays a pretty significant role. Now, 2 of them definitely have dancing featured prominently throughout. The other, it's more of like a theme.
Looking at your list, there is one I have a question about, but we're going to get to that at some point.
Right. Well, before we get into the picks, I got to ask one question of you, and it relates to something that we talk about almost as often as the staff recommendation shelf, which is sections of the store. Do you feel like dancing is deserving of its own section in the store? Dance movies with dancing?
Well, we do have some mini sections of the store that involve dancing. As far as we've had these meetings at the store over and over again and argued about what the sections should be, and we've ultimately decided that dancing should not have its own section of the store. It should be in their own mini sections. The dancing movies.
Great. Okay, that's where I land too.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that you can find dancing in all of the sections, and yes, as to your point, we do have some mini sections. But
I only have one movie that's even filed under dancing. Honestly.
Right. Yeah. I feel like if there's a single genre that overlaps with dancing, most often it's romance. So, dance romance Dance Mance feels like maybe something that we could toy with as a mini section, but. Yeah, I'm excited to see what. I'm excited to talk about what you picked tonight. Talk about what I've picked.
Yeah, we may even dance later to celebrate this episode.
We may, or may not.
Yeah, probably off mic.
We don't have a dance floor.
We do dance in the store sometimes, but you have to be here to see it.
Well, hey, get us started with your first pick. I'm excited to discuss it. It's a good one. So,
okay.
Take us away.
I'm going to start us off with a movie that is dance-filled.
Yes.
This movie is called Girl Walk All Day from 2011. This is filed under Dance-a-thons in the music and performance section of the store. Here's the back of the box. A feature-length dance music video and tale of urban exploration that follows 3 dancers across New York City. They turn the city's sidewalks, parks, and stadiums into an evolving stage as a story of rebellion, love, and discovery unfolds. Tagline: not good. It's a music video of epic proportions. Yeah, disappointing. Girl Talk is a mashup DJ.
Right.
That is, this is a full-length music video for his album All Day. He's a DJ. If you're not familiar with him, I know you are personally.
Yes.
Some customers may not be. He uses hundreds of songs to create what are essentially album-long dance mixes. He hasn't put out any Girl Talk stuff in a while, probably because it's not possible to make money from it.
Right.
But he's been playing some live shows in recent years, and he's producing stuff. So apparently the director, Jacob Krupnik, he was shooting a shoe commercial or something, and he had like 50 dancers there, and this dancer, Ann Marzin, he's like, there's something about the way she dances. I kind of like what she's doing. So he talked to her, and they decided they wanted to do something in the future. And so they shot a trailer for this, and they started a Kickstarter, and they raised $12,000.
Wow.
And it was kind of spurred on by the fact that they had heard this album that Girl Talk put out, and they're like, this would be really cool to do as some sort of a dance music video. And so they raised a whole bunch of money, more than they thought. I mean, whole bunch in the context of doing what they're doing. Right. So I don't know if it's ever got an actual release. Probably because same thing. I don't know that you can legitimately release this movie.
Yeah, licensing would be
difficult. The licensing issues are very hard. It is on the girltalkallday.com website. It's on YouTube if you search right. Possibly a couple bootleg copies behind the counter of select video stores around the country.
Right.
They're out there. But this is sort of a combination of music video, documentary, TikTok, Instagram thing. But it also reminded me a lot of a skateboarding video.
Yeah, I get that.
Because very similar to like how we follow our characters around the city, and they're kind of like doing a bit in this part of town in front of people who don't necessarily know what's happening. There's also no dialogue, just like a skateboarding video. It's just music and dancing.
Right.
But I also think that like every flash mob or TikTok public dance video that has happened in the last 10 years or so is they think they're making this movie.
Yes.
And they are not.
No.
This is an incredible, for one, it's an incredible people watching experience.
Oh, yeah.
Like way more than you think it's going to be. Like even documentaries, you don't get that. You don't get a street level view of New York as you're going through town and like watching people's reactions as like some shit happens in front of them that they were not expecting. Some people don't care, which is like, fine. Yeah. Some people like get into it. Some people, it's just a great view of the public.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that's one thing that really struck me while I was watching this is obviously the movie is shot on the fly, without necessarily getting people's permission to film. And a lot of people
kicked out of Yankee Stadium during a game.
Right. A lot of the people were unfazed, and it's such a true to life depiction of just what happens normally in New York, where a lot of these people are just going about their day, and this is happening in front of them, and they're like, whatever, this is just another day in New York.
Well, think about it now, too.
Yeah.
Now that everybody's got a TikTok account and whatnot. This is back in 2011 before the Facebook mobile app even existed.
Yeah.
And so now you think like, you walk down New York, it's like every block, it's 2 or 3 people are doing a doing content of some sort. So it's like now it's just nauseating.
Yeah.
Then it was a lot more rare, or a lot more. It was a lot more rare. But yeah, still, like it's a very weird thing. And of course, back then the camera's bigger, so it looks more professional. I think.
Yeah.
You know, nowadays it would just be a video, a phone. So like no one would care.
Right.
You know,
Right.
would even be a big deal. What's amazing about this movie is that in 74 minutes and with no dialogue spoken whatsoever, they're, I think, more successful on a character and story level than pretty much anything the MCU has done in the last, 15 years?
Bold claim.
I mean, there's a clear and simple story. The characters are surprisingly well developed. We know who they are. We know what they want. The plot has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's very satisfying on a story level if you watch it for that.
Yeah.
There's no reason to watch it for that. No. The dancing it's fun, it's exuberant, and it's nonstop. It's 74 straight minutes of dancing.
Yeah. I was impressed that the styles of dancing between the main characters was so unique to each person. You know, they all have their own approach, and everything that they're doing feels fit to the music.
There's like a weird energy to the main dancers, the way she dances. Like it doesn't seem there's just like something very chaotic about it. It doesn't seem like she's dancing in a style.
No, it doesn't. But that's also true of the music. You know, I mean, it's a mashup of different styles of music, and it's hard to pin a certain approach to dancing to what you're hearing because it's, classic rock mixed with hip hop sometimes. And I think what she's doing really suits the music.
Yeah, it's very like improvisational, very expressive.
And inclusive. You know, she gets people to engage with her, and part of that is not just her dancing, but her personality, and that comes through.
There's a very like regular person quality to her dancing, and then there's definitely like regular people in this movie. I mean, there's obviously a lot of people who are also either professional or at least like trained dancers that are in this doing, kind of like, we're coming off the street doing this stuff. But yeah, there's also some just like regular ass people doing some like regular ass stuff. The thing with the Beyonce song, where they like gather, over an afternoon it seems like they gather a bunch of people to do this thing. That's a pretty cool moment. There's lots of different kinds of just like street dancing, people doing break dancing and the pop and lock stuff and the spin around on the floor type stuff. Yeah. It's just a lot of different kinds of people who look like they're not dancers. There's just groups of like regular ass people doing things.
Well, I think that the reason it works so well, especially when it includes various people from the city, is because Girl Talk's music is so perfect for dancing. I don't know if you've ever been to one of the shows, but inevitably, everyone in the crowd is dancing. And also, inevitably, everyone files on stage at some point and they are dancing around the DJ. Yeah. The whole stage is filled with concert goers and they're all just dancing together. And so it's music that lends itself to this type of filmmaking, and it works really well.
Well, I mean, it goes to show you this is not a movie that's just filled with dancing. This is a movie that can facilitate dancing.
Yes.
It's a dance album, That's what this album is for, and it's the music video for that album. So, you could put this movie on at a dance party and it wouldn't be out of place.
Not at all. Yeah. No, I think it would probably get things going.
Yeah. Probably be a good party starter. But yeah, I love this movie. It's just so much fun to watch. The celebration of music and movement and humanity. Yes. It features dancing from beginning to end. It's a great look at New York from a ground level perspective, and it makes the audience want to dance. And so I'm starting it off this week by putting it on the staff recommendation shelf for dancing.
I didn't know about this. I'm glad you turned me on to it. I really love Girl Talk, and this is a great celebration of his music. And you can't divorce his music from dancing. So I'm glad that something like this exists. I'd encourage our customers to give it a shot.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Well, I'm going to go in a darker direction. My first choice for tonight is 2018's Climax. And I say it like that because there's an exclamation point at the end of the movie title.
Is there?
There is, yeah. This is filed into the we assure you this isn't porn section of the store.
It's not.
It's not. It's definitely not. Back of the box synopsis. Young dancers gather in a remote and empty school building to rehearse on a cold and wintry night. The all-night celebration soon turns into a hallucinatory nightmare when they learn that their sangria is laced with LSD. Tagline, this is a questionable one. Birth and death are extraordinary experiences. Life is a fleeting pleasure.
Yeah. I feel like they just took that straight out of some of the on-screen titles.
I agree. So this movie begins with some interview clips of this dance troupe talking to camera, speaking about dancing. The questions that they answer provide some foreshadowing into what happens in this movie. But the first question has them describing their relationship with dancing. And for every person, dancing is life. It turns out dancing is also death for
Yes.
quite a few of these characters. But interestingly, these clips are played on a small television during the opening scene. And flanking the television are books and movie boxes that also provide some additional foreshadowing. And one of the films that's off to the side of the television is another movie that I chose for tonight's theme. We'll get to that one soon.
Yes.
So Climax comes to us by way of Gaspar Noé. And like most of Gaspar's this descends into nightmare territory at a certain point. I remember being reluctant to give this a shot because Gaspar Noé directed perhaps one of my least favorite films of all time, and so I'm generally reluctant to give his stuff a watch.
Which one is that?
That's the movie Irreversible.
Okay.
Climax, it turned out to be a pretty one-of-a-kind experience. So ultimately, this is a film about a bad acid trip and what happens when a bunch of people, unique people, are confined to a space together and are all experiencing that bad trip together simultaneously. So,
I have some opinions on that as well.
Yeah. I'm excited to get to them. So, the entire cast here comprised of professional dancers with no prior acting experience. The only exception is Sofia Boutella, who is an actor who has a background in dance. But yeah, there's several long takes in this movie. They aren't pulled off with any camera trickery or hidden cuts. The opening dance sequence, which is pretty remarkable, was all done without a cut. Second half of the film is almost entirely a single unbroken 42-minute take. What I found especially interesting about this is there was no script for this movie. So the director gave the cast some...
I'm not surprised.
Yeah. The director gave the cast some loose notes on what where he was hoping the story would go, but he let them improvise all of their own dialogue, take the characters on whatever journey felt appropriate to the actors who were playing the roles. His only direction was that the fragile characters have to die at the end, only the strong survive. And with most
like any good acid party.
Yeah. With most of the characters, he didn't know how their stories would end. So I'm going to talk about why I chose this, but I have a sense that you have some thoughts on this. I'm curious just...
Well, I'll start off by saying I went on a wild roller coaster ride in this movie with this movie because you talked about the beginning of the movie when they are doing the interview segments on video.
Yeah.
And that's like the first, 7-8 minutes of the movie, maybe 10 at the most.
Yes.
And man, I was like, I want this to end right now. Like I was so disinterested. Yeah. And then it gets to the first dance sequence, which is like another solid 10 minutes of no cuts, and it's an amazing dance sequence. And at that point, I'm thinking this might be the best movie I've ever seen.
Wow, a roller coaster ride indeed.
It's not where I landed at the end. It was a ride.
Yeah. So like I said, I have a chip on my shoulder when it comes to Noé for making me endure the nightmare experience that is Irreversible from 2002. He's definitely a director that likes to provoke, and oftentimes that doesn't work for me. It happens again in this film, but I actually think this is probably his best work. Again, I'm just measuring it against his movies. But the dancing here, which is kind of a mixture of vogue and crumping is pretty remarkable. You spoke about that opening dance sequence, which sees this troupe rehearsing. I think it's absolutely outstanding. For a movie,
and again, it's a solid uncut shot, and then they're done with the dancing, and then they move on and they start like acting.
Yes,
and you're like, they were just jumping all over the fucking room, and now they're just like playing a part. It's incredible.
It is. It's fun to watch, and all of the dancers have their own personality to what they do, and there's a lot of different styles at play. But I think for a movie that was conceived and shot without much structure, this comes together in, if nothing else, a compelling way. I'm going to stop short of saying an impressive way, because there's a lot of criticism leveled at this movie for whether or not it has a story to tell. I don't know that it does, but I don't know that it needs one. It feels to me like it's a movie that belongs less to the directors and more to the actors that were a part of it, basically because they're making their own characters up on the spot. Gaspar Noé wasn't really concerned with adhering to filmmaking norms with this picture. The credits happened 5 minutes in the movie. The last 15 minutes were shot upside down. There's a lot of strange stuff that happens. And that probably makes it sound like it was more of an art project than, an actual movie. Yeah, I still think it functions as a film with a narrative. There was a review from a guy named Ray Pride of New City who had this to say about the film. He said, "Climax is a rude, refined, gyroscopic, hurtling mashup of heaven and hell with bravura dance numbers and a ravishing range of bodies and orchestrations of sensual motion and the camera brandishing its lavish mobility for moments on end." Maybe high praise. I am going to brace our customers for the fact that there are several scenes in this movie that are pretty uncomfortable, maybe unsettling. It's certainly not the first time that I've brought a movie to the table.
It seems like you're saying that every episode.
Yeah, I know. I realize that's
you
kind of...
Think about that. There's no cannibalism in this, though.
There is not. But it's definitely something that you need to be ready for.
I will say that their reaction to the acid is it's not realistic.
It made me wonder if, I know that some of the actors said that this was reminiscent of a bad trip for them. And perhaps for some it was. But I have a hard time believing that everybody was on a bad trip. Right. And, maybe...
That's not you. That's not... I mean, the thing is, like, they're being spiked with it, so, like... You don't really know. You're not prepared, and you don't know how much they're taking. But the thing is, in a punch bowl, it's probably not that much because it has to be diluted into the rest of the punch, unless you're pouring in like a whole bunch.
Right.
But the thing is, first of all, it would never descend that quickly into madness.
No, and it does descend into madness.
Yeah, it's just like, also it's like at some point I was just like, these people somebody needs to handle their fucking high, man. And like someone needs to be like, all right, we're tripping, like, let's chill out for a second. Instead of taking the one sober guy, throwing him outside, and taking the child who needs taken care of and locking him in a closet, you're like, those two people should be in the same room together, away from everybody else. That's number one. Yes. And if someone needs to go around to the party and go like, guys, everything's cool. We just took acid. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I get it. They're not ready for it. But somebody in that room needs to step up and be a drug adult.
Well, yes. I don't disagree. I was impressed that, in spite of the fact that there are several characters who go on wild benders, there are others who are just committed to dancing the entire time.
Yeah, and that's realistic.
Yeah.
And also people getting just like wildly violent all of a sudden on acid. Like, violent. I mean, people do have bad trips and people do crazy stuff, but I don't know. I haven't done these studies myself, but I think if you give a room full of people acids, one person might have a violent bad trip like that.
Yeah.
It's not going to just be... I think honestly, it seems like they got PCP.
It does.
I don't think it's acid.
Right. There's a section of the movie where for about 15 minutes we're hearing all the characters talking about sex. And the first time I saw this, I was like, this feels really out of place, and I don't like it, and especially don't like some of the things these characters are saying. But after some more consideration, I think that exists to depict these characters as animals underneath what they're doing, and you see them descend into animal-like behavior later in the movie.
Plus, also get a bunch of people in their 20s and feed them alcohol. And this is what some people are going to be saying at that party, you know.
For sure.
Like, that people just talk shit. They don't necessarily mean the things they're saying. But also, I don't necessarily want to see it in a movie.
Right. Well, this averages a 3.8 on Letterboxd. Yeah. I'm eager to find out what our customers think about it. So I'm throwing it on the shelf as my first pick for our dancing theme. And I do think that if nothing else, it's got a tremendous dance number in the beginning of this movie that's worth the price of admission alone.
I will say I can't personally recommend this movie. I didn't enjoy it. But the dance scene is out of this world.
It's out of this world.
And so if it starts to get into an area you're like, well, I'm not really digging this, I'll just tell you it's not going to get better. So enjoy the dance number, and then when you're done watching it, I would say turn it off. But this is one of those classic Bob. This is a hard movie to watch, but for some people, it's really going to pay off.
Yes. Great. Well, I'm glad to hear your take and eager for what our customers have to say.
Okay, I'm going to take us into a slightly more crowd-pleasing direction.
Great.
To the year of 1996. The movie is Swingers.
Ooh, yeah.
This is filed under Bro Hangs in the comedy section. This is directed by Doug Liman and, importantly, written by Jon Favreau. Here's the back of the box. After 6 years together, Mike's girlfriend leaves him, so he travels to L.A. to be a star. 6 months on, he's still not doing very well. So a few of his friends try to reconnect him to the social scene and hopefully help him forget his failed relationship. Tagline, get a nightlife.
Great tagline.
One of the all-timers.
It's a good one.
It's so good.
Yes.
I think Swingers is, without a doubt, one of the quintessential independent movies of the 90s.
1,000%.
No doubt. It served as the launching pad for Vince Vaughn, Jon Favreau, Doug Liman, who have gone on to have big careers. It also had Ron Livingston in an early role.
Yeah.
Heather Graham in a kind of an early role. I mean, she'd had a career before this, but
this is a movie that the Miramax was. This is the type of movie that Miramax was great at making.
Yeah.
And I mean, independent in the truest sense of the term. They were, they were shooting this without people realizing it at clubs. And
oh, yeah.
I mean, everything was on a down and dirty budget.
Guerrilla style.
Yeah.
It's like one of those classic 90s independent productions.
Yes.
Like, I don't think they were using credit cards, but they might as well have been.
Yeah.
I think like all the Vegas scenes they shot in one night, which is like 15 minutes of the movie. And then that scene on the side of the road, they were like basically getting arrested while they were finishing that scene. They were still shooting it. I think Swingers is one of the all-time LA movies.
Oh yeah.
Captures kind of that unique 90s LA energy. It had the independent movie culture, and then people who were in their 20s were moving there and trying to be part of it. And also like it captured that moment when like lounge stuff was cool, that like very specific 90s idea of retro when it was
Swing
happening.
Dancing.
Yes, yeah.
Bowling shirts.
Yeah, the bowling shirts was which happened for like a minute.
Yeah.
But yeah, it also it like captured these subcultures at like just these perfect times, but it doesn't seem like it was out. Like it didn't seem sad when it came out. You're like, ugh.
No, it didn't. In fact, it felt really relatable because this is such a hangout movie, and it captured the way men hung out with each other at a certain time period, and you didn't see stuff like that in movies. It was refreshing because it was familiar.
Yeah. Well, like in the LA it was showing.
Yes.
That was up until that point, if I saw LA in a movie, it was like, oh, these criminals or these executives or whatever, and like
glitz, glam, that type of thing.
Yeah, even though these guys were like 10 years older than we were, it seemed like they were my age. You know, because when you're 16 years old, you kind of mid 20s, we're kind of the same.
Right.
So it seemed like I was like, yeah, I play video games with my friends, and like it actually it made drinking seem cooler than I was not a drinker in high school. But when I saw this movie, I was like, oh, I kind of can't wait till I can like hang out in bars and stuff. But yeah, it made LA seem like a city that I could relate to. It also, I think it's possibly the most important Vegas movie of all time.
Ooh, bold claim.
That is a bold claim, but if you remember, and the movie even makes reference to this, Vegas was not a cool place in the 90s.
No.
It was kind of a joke, and in this movie, it's kind of a joke. The Pirates of the Caribbean shit is a joke.
Yeah.
And that's what Vegas had become, and Trent was like, no, we got to go downtown. That's the old school Vegas. That's the cool Vegas.
Yes.
And it's not, because it was sad, and the old Vegas kind of is still like that, but which kind of makes it cool again, I guess.
Yes.
But yeah, like Vegas had completely lost that like swinging coolness of the Rat Pack era. And swingers kind of just like saw the value of recapturing that energy.
I agree. I think that Vegas in this time period was people thought about it the way they currently think about Atlantic City.
Yeah.
It's just this place that's like, oh,
kind of sad. Yeah, that's where like old people go to like lose all their money.
Right.
And think of the arc that Vegas went on between this and Ocean's 11, which was 5 years later.
The city reinvented itself.
It's like, but I also think Vegas, like I'm not saying swingers is the reason for this, but I think it had a part in that. Like the demographic that swingers was becoming huge with was the demographic that Vegas wants, right?
Yes.
And so I think somebody in Vegas figured out like we need to capture that money. Like these guys want to come and be cool in Vegas. Like we need to make that a thing.
Well,
and then like in 2003 was the what happens here stays here, and like by then they had just fucking nailed it. And
you took the words out of my mouth.
The rest is history.
I was going to say that campaign I think channeled the energy of this movie, and it was it would be hard to believe that it wasn't a product of what we're seeing in this movie. That
Vegas, baby. I mean, it started in this movie.
Right.
Just kind of, and so like I really do think that this had a huge part in the rebirth of Vegas becoming like a real place that people actually want to go to and isn't just sad.
Yeah.
And it's also aged gracefully as we've gotten older. Like before, like I said, like as a teenager, this was aspirational.
Yes.
In my 20s, it was kind of like, oh, I see the struggles that, not thinking that I should have everything figured out, but I don't, and just like kind of have that lost feeling of being in your 20s. Like it's very relatable in this movie. And then in my 30s and now my 40s, I look back at this movie, I'm like, oh, that's what my 20s were like. Like it was kind of a mess, but like some things were like really awesome. There was like these peaks that were just, you'd never want to go back and relive, but some things were fucking great, and so it's relatable. As I get older, this movie keeps aging along with me, and and it completely holds up to this day.
Yeah, I agree. It's fun to look back on. It definitely feels like a different era, but not in a bad way. It feels like I'm looking back on a time where I was, young and like trying to make ends meet and not always succeeding.
Yeah, and you know what this movie doesn't get enough credit for? It normalized affirmation between male friends.
Yes.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I had the wrong friends when I was a teenager, but I don't remember guys talking this way to each other, like, no, man, you're great. Like, you're money.
Yeah.
And I feel like this movie made that a thing that was okay to do.
Yes.
And I feel like that now that's just like the way people talk to each other. Maybe it's overdone.
Maybe. But yeah, the friendship that these guys have is definitely something that feels good to watch and was uncommon at the time. But yeah, it goes back to that idea of it being such a great hangout movie. I think that you like the relationships that exist in this movie and the way these guys talk to one another. It's fun.
The dancing is brief.
It is,
but it's fun. It's compelling.
Oh
right?
yeah,
it's
intimate.
Yeah, and like you're not ready for it. You're like, wait a second, are they going to start swing dancing right now?
Right,
there's nothing to lead you up to that moment, but also you're like, okay, I'm gonna buy this in this moment. They don't really have to sell it, but it works. It's also like really transformative for Mikey. It's like dancing is what allows him to break out of his shell and become who he really is, allows him to connect with somebody finally after all this time. And so, I mean, not even his friends knew that he can dance. He had hidden it from himself. And so dancing is what allows him to interact with the world again after being so depressed for all that time.
You see his character transform in that scene because he starts off very apprehensive and hesitant to lean into it.
Even though he can he's got the skills.
He knows he can dance, yeah. And he really owns it. It reminded me that around this time, the swing dancing lessons were happening. And I remember with my high school girlfriend taking swing dancing lessons and thinking to myself, why the fuck am I here? But
it was the bowling shows, right?
It was, yeah. And it was a thing that was happening in culture at the time. And, I don't think this movie was trying to reference what was happening in the world. I think it was just part of the story that was being told, but they synced up nicely.
It really did. I didn't want to start swing dancing like you did after I saw this movie, but it was.
That was the first and last time that I did
just one lesson.
Just one.
You're like, I'm gonna learn, and then one day I'm gonna be in a bar. I'm gonna be at the Dresden. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Swingers is a timeless American classic. I think it captures the spirit of 90s independent movies, depicts young adulthood and male friendship in a fresh way, and great. It's a great Vegas movie. It's a great LA movie, and the dancing is cool. It plays a critical role in the movie, and I think it definitely deserves a place on the shelf for dancing.
Brief but integral dancing.
Yes, absolutely. This movie doesn't get to the end without dancing.
No, it doesn't. Well, great pick. I never turned down an opportunity to watch Swingers, and I'm glad that it's on the staff recommendation shelf because I think there's a generation of people that have no idea. They don't even know this movie exists. And to see Jon Favreau, Vince Vaughn, Doug Liman all kind of getting their start with this and to know where they went is pretty remarkable because, this is long before the old school Vince Vaughn, and long before Favreau ever got into directing. But
he had a pretty strong authorial hand as the writer in this. He had a lot of opinions and storyboards and whatnot. But Vince Vaughn, this is just his performance defined this movie.
Oh yeah,
and his performance in this movie kind of defined his career for a long time. It probably still does.
Yeah, there was a period where he kept trying to channel this, and it didn't feel like it was working for him. It didn't feel like Hollywood wanted to take him seriously as a dramatic actor. And his performance is funny. It's not like he's trying to be a serious dude in this, but I think he really came into his own when he leaned into the parts like he played in Old School or The Breakup or Role Model. Yeah, there's a bunch of movies he was in, that were different.
Yeah,
for him.
The older Vince Vaughn.
Yeah. But this one's a great one, so I'm glad you brought it up. All right, I'm going to take us to a different style of dancing with my second pick, and we're going to 2012 with Magic Mike. Again, from the We Assure You This Isn't Porn section of the store. Back of the box.
This is more porn than the last one.
This is more porn, but still not porn.
Still not porn.
And definitely not cannibalism.
Yeah, we can rent it to your kids.
By day, Mike makes ends meet any way he can. Handyman jobs, detailing cars, or designing furniture. But nighttime is when Mike really gets to display his many talents. He's the hot headliner in an all-male review. Mike sees potential in a 19-year-old he dubs the Kid, takes the teen under his wing, and instructs him in the tricks of the trade. However, Mike learns there's a downside to the stripper lifestyle when it threatens his romance with the Kid's sister. Tagline here, work all day, work it all night. It's a good tagline.
It's good. I feel like we should just change the show and just
celebrate taglines.
Talk about taglines.
Well, I'm going to start this off with a Letterboxd review. This comes from the 5-star review by Taylor Williams, where he says, actually, the straightest thing you can do is show your girlfriend Magic Mike. I gave this a watch because Steven Soderbergh is one of those directors who has my attention no matter what he makes. And I'm pretty sure there's a contingent of our customer base who have actively avoided this movie because they assume they're not interested in a movie about male strippers. I think this is a movie about more than men taking their clothes off. It is semi-autobiographical. Channing Tatum did have a stint as a stripper before getting into acting, and he told Soderbergh about that experience when they were filming Haywire together, and Soderbergh was intrigued. The two of them decided to make this movie. So I don't think this would be the same film without Soderbergh behind the camera and Channing Tatum in front of it. Tatum in particular, pretty amazing. He's charismatic, sympathetic. He's confident. He's vulnerable in this. But he's also a fucking incredible dancer.
He's a really good dancer.
So good at dancing. We kind of knew this about him because he starred in the first Step Up movie. But this is clearly a closer depiction of the life that he once led. It's personal. It seems pretty personal. So I'm a fan of Magic Mike.
Yeah.
How did you feel about it?
I liked it. I didn't love it. But yeah, I got behind it. I wish Matthew McConaughey was in it like the whole time. I could not get enough of his character.
I don't disagree, and that plays into why I did choose this. But
it's just like the whole the stuff with the kid and whatever, and that's fine. That was all kind of boilerplate, whatever.
Yeah.
Matthew McConaughey, every second he was on screen, I'm like, just keep this going on forever. Yeah.
Keep the camera rolling. Well, before I get into why I love this, I will say that this is not a very sexual movie. Even the stripping scenes are shot in a way that doesn't really make them feel intimate.
I think I would say it's sexual, but it's definitely not intimate.
Yeah. I mean, it's not shot docu style, but the club scenes just feel very matter of fact. It's more like, this is what's happening here.
I like how the music was mixed in, where it's just you just hear it in the background at the club, and that's what it actually sounds like at dance clubs or strip clubs or whatever.
Yeah, just all it's shot in a way that feels like it has to be part of the story that we're telling, but it's not like Soderbergh's trying to turn you on with these scenes. At least I didn't feel that way.
Maybe a little bit.
So why did I choose this? I thought that this was an interesting depiction of blue-collar life in Florida during a financial crisis. I'm not suggesting that the financial crisis plays a very significant role in this. In fact, there's only really a subtle reference to it. But I think that it's important not to overlook because, we have one scene where Tatum's character is attempting to get a loan to kind of start his furniture business. Mm-hmm. The bank won't loan him the money. And it reminds you that Magic Mike is probably stuck in this lifestyle and, he's destined to probably stay mired in the stripping industry much the way that Matthew McConaughey's character is. McConaughey owns the club where they all work. And this is just one of the scenes where Magic Mike is constantly being reminded that the world sees him in one way in spite of the fact that he wants to kind of distance himself from the associations and the stereotypes that come with stripping. And I like that the movie wants to tell that story. But I love that you brought up McConaughey, and he is so fucking good in this. He described this part as one being one of only two movies that he accepted over the phone without reading his script. The other was the Linkletter movie. I have to believe that it was what am I thinking of?
I don't know. So, he's in Dazed. But...
Yeah, Dazed and Confused. Yeah. I think that was the other one. But he accepted this and knew that it was going to be a part that would let him just soar. And he sure does lean into it hard. And
I wish it had just been about these guys running their strip club.
Yeah.
Instead of bringing in the new guys. I guess you can do. I wish it was more of a story about Matthew McConaughey and his strippers running the strip club. How do they make money? How do they bring people in? And
what's it like in the back room?
There's a little bit of that, but.
Yeah, we don't get a lot.
Yeah.
We don't get a lot. It's definitely more Channing Tatum's character story. But yeah, the stuff with just operating the club, I could have used more of that. I would have liked the director's cut with more of that. I would say there's not nearly as much dancing in this movie as people might expect. There's probably 15 to 20 minutes of it. And but what is there
there's substantial dancing.
Yeah, and what's there is pretty impressive. Channing Tatum is a big man. And the fact that he does all this dancing on his own without a stunt double, pretty mind-boggling. He's fucking good at it. Yeah. And it's no matter what, you see him on screen and you're like, wow, this guy is
He's got the goods.
Yeah, he's a specimen. So this comes in at exactly a 3.0 on Letterboxd, which is just slightly below what I gave it. But separate from the score, I think it's a worthy watch that probably serves up more plot and character arc than people might expect from a movie about men taking their clothes off. So here it is, Magic Mike. If you haven't seen it, give it a watch. It's
worth
good.
a watch.
I did happen across the very interesting bit of trivia that this movie was wildly popular in opening weekend in red states, more so than it was in blue states. Like it blew the roof off the theaters in like Tennessee and Kentucky. It didn't do very well in like the New Yorks of the world.
Interesting.
So, yeah, read into that whatever you will.
Sure. Okay, well, I'm going to take us in a different direction.
Yes.
Take us to the year of 2022. I'm going to choose Noah Baumbach's White Noise. This is written and directed by Baumbach. This is based on a book by Don DeLillo. Yeah. Possibly Don DeLillo. I have always said DeLillo, but I've never heard anyone say it out loud now that I'm reading it.
I think I've said DeLillo, but I don't know with authority how it's pronounced.
All you DeLillo heads out there, just get in touch. Here's the back of the box. Jack Gladney, professor of Hitler studies at the College on the Hill, husband to Babette, and father to 4 children / stepchildren, is torn asunder by a chemical spill from a rail car that releases a, quote, airborne toxic event, forcing Jack to confront his biggest fear, his own mortality. Tagline, you can't hear it if it's everywhere.
Questionable tagline for me.
I like that.
You like that one?
I think that's great.
Interesting.
You can't hear it if it's everywhere.
I need more to it, I think.
Have you read this book?
No.
I have not read the book either. It's one of those books that it's kind of been on my to-read list for like 20 years, and I've never read anything he's written.
I haven't read it, but I've heard it described as I hear a lot of Cormac McCarthy books described, which is like unfilmable. This movie can't be made.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I've heard that, and it's one of those books that has always been considered unfilmable, and people have considered making it for a long time. I mean, it deals with death and consumerism and academia and media overload and institutional failure, the disintegration of the common understanding of the world. So yeah, I mean, it's not really a film, like a movie book necessarily. But this, I mean, I'm not sure I disagree with that necessarily. I really like this movie, but it might not be a filmable book. Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
There's just an uncomfortable energy about this movie that it makes it seem a bit off.
Yes.
But like it resonates with me.
Interesting.
There's just this ambient tension to the world, a white noise, if you will, and we kind of feel it for the whole movie.
Yes.
There's a disconnect between like what every character is doing from what every other character is doing.
I think that has a lot to. Yes. So I agree with you. I think it also has a lot to do with how the dialogue is written and shot, because it's overlapping. It's hard to parse at times.
It's very dense, like
yes,
like kind of literally.
Yes,
like there's 3 people in a shot and they're all talking in different directions to different people or maybe to themselves. It's one of those movies. But yeah, it's like also like it's the world. It's just all this information is flying around, and like there's so much of it that none of it means anything anymore. You know, it's impossible to process all this information. Everything's become white noise. But modern American life has become this like absurd, grotesque display of like just ridiculousness. And I think this movie kind of understands that. It's just kind of like it understands that it's a joke. I don't know. Did you find this movie funny?
Laugh out loud funny only once.
Really?
But yeah.
I get that.
When they're fleeing from the airborne toxic event, yes. But otherwise, no. I found it amusing, but not funny.
Yeah. I laughed out loud several times. Both times
Really?
I've seen this movie. Absolutely.
Okay.
I think the cast is giving just like wackadoodle performances. I think Don Cheadle is like off his ass.
Oh, Don Cheadle's remarkable. But that's Don Cheadle. Don Cheadle's good at this type of thing.
Yes.
And he's untapped.
It's like this stilted performance of a personality.
Yes.
You know, and he's able to do that perfectly. Greta Gerwig is just like on a different fucking planet.
Yes.
But somehow that's exactly who this character is.
Boy, she's good. It had been a while since I'd seen her in anything when she started in this. Anytime she's on camera, not just behind the camera, she's really talented.
And Adam Driver, to me, stands out. He's doing things with his character that are like hard to describe. Like he constantly looks like he's digesting something poorly, or like he has a gait and a posture to him that just like it's all screwed up, and like you can just see the pathetic years on his life of doing this thing that's like basically pointless.
Yeah.
And then, like, this is when I really found the movie funny, was, like, that guy was like, well, yeah, like, oh, you were exposed to this toxic event, like, you might die from it. And then, like, that just sends him into this tailspin where he's like, wait, so, like, I might die? He's like, yeah. So it turns out, like, if you die in the next 15 years, it might be because of that. But if not, then it probably isn't, but it still might be. And so he's like, what do you mean? And do you remember the Mr. Show skit, the imminent death syndrome?
Yes.
That's exactly what this is.
Yes.
Like, even at some point, he's talking about to somebody, and he's like, well, I can't remember the exact wording, but he's like, I'm scheduled at some indeterminate time in the future to die. And it's and everyone's like, oh my God, are you okay? And it's like, what the fuck are we talking about here? And like, I don't know. It's just, it's such a crazy idea to try to put that in a movie. And to me, Adam Driver makes it work. It's like this psychological slapstick that he's just like throwing himself down a hill. And you're like, there's no way this is going to be funny. And then it is funny.
Yeah.
But the only dancing we get is over the end credits.
I don't think that's the only dancing we get, but go ahead. Finish your point.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Am I just forgetting something, or
no,
you're taking it?
I'm going a little more abstract.
So it's over the end credits, and it's when the entire cast does a routine throughout the grocery store, and the grocery store plays a central part of these characters' lives. There's a part in the grocery store in the beginning, in the middle, and the end. This movie's kind of told in chapters, and the grocery store is kind of in the middle of the universe. And to me, this movie, here's my take. This movie understands that the grocery store is the central experience of modern civilization. That is what holds us together. That is what makes it all worth it, is because we can walk into a grocery store in pretty much any town we go to and easily buy food that we can feed ourselves with. And this movie gets that, and it celebrates it with a 7.5-minute dance sequence.
I don't disagree with you. I think that this movie has something to say about the grocery store and our relationship to it and the world that we live in.
Yes, this movie is about grocery stores.
Interesting, yeah.
That's what it ultimately comes down to.
Fascinating. Now, I didn't take that away from it, but I do appreciate what it's trying to do with that end scene. And when I first finished watching this, I thought, why was that there? But
because it's about grocery stores.
But it's essential.
Yeah.
It belongs in the movie, and I love the way they treat the dancing in this, and the fact that it's not as perfectly choreographed as what you typically expect from a dance scene in a movie.
Well, I would argue that it is choreographed, but like they're not doing great dance moves.
Right.
It's like they look like what my mom could do. You know?
Every
like,
person is
move a box from here to here, and that's dancing, right?
And it's not. Yeah, they're not all perfectly timed. Like everybody's kind of like they feel like real people, and I appreciated that.
Even though Andre 3000 was there, shaking a box back and forth, he was doing the most simple dance. You're like, the one guy can dance.
Oh yeah,
is just not even really doing it. Yeah.
So here's what I mean by that not being the only dance sequence in this movie. I think that the way this movie is written and performed by the actors is so different from what we normally see in a film, where one character says their line of dialogue, the other character is waiting for them to finish and then jumps in with their line. There's such a dance that exists in many of these scenes between how the actors are engaging with one another and how they're playing this scene, that it feels musical in a way, and a little bit chaotic, but also just choreographed. I did appreciate that about this. I gotta say, Noah Baumbach is one of those directors like Wes Anderson. He feels like he's like a cousin of Wes Anderson or something. Mm-hmm. And a lot of his movies I bounce off of for the same reasons that I usually bounce off of most of Wes Anderson's films. But this was fun to watch, although not my favorite Noah Baumbach movie.
I get that.
I'm glad I saw it, though.
I wouldn't say, I mean, it's not, I would consider it a comedy, but it's not necessarily a comedy that you're going to like feel good about the world afterwards. If you feel like laughing at how stupid everything is, that's kind of the comedy I think it is. Yeah, I mean, it's not for everybody.
No, but it's there's something impressive with what Noah Baumbach is doing, and I can understand why this book has a reputation for being unfilmable, because it seems like it was a real journey to get this thing to screen. Yeah. But he pulled it off. And
yeah, I mean, it's one of those movies, if you find yourself on its wavelength, I think it's going to be really rewarding. I think multiple watches pay off because of all the things that are going on. It's perplexing. It's disorienting. So is the world. Yeah. So I don't know. I think it has a lot to say. I think it's very funny. And I think the dance scene is essential. I think it shows us what the movie is about and what our ultimately civilization is about. And so I'm throwing it on the shelf for dancing.
Good pick. This is probably not one that I would have watched if not for the fact that you were selecting it tonight. I'm glad I saw it and eager to see what people think about it. Well, I'm going to close things out with my final pick, which is 1977's Suspiria, pulled from the You Better Own a Color Television section of the store. Back of the box. From the moment she arrives in Freiburg, Germany, to attend the prestigious Tanz Academy, American ballet dancer Susie Banyan senses that something horribly evil lurks within the walls of the age-old institution. Be ready for disappointment. The tagline here is the most frightening film you'll ever see.
What?
Yeah. Spoiler, this is not the most frightening film that you'll ever see.
Who came up with that?
Yeah, it's a classic, but it's not the most frightening film. So I first saw Suspiria in college in the early 2000s. Prior to seeing this, I was most familiar with big budget American horror, nothing out of the ordinary. This showed me that I had only scratched the surface of this genre that I would go on to love, and that there was a whole world of film out there that I had yet to discover. So this has some personal significance to me.
Nice.
Suspiria was remade in 2018, but Dario Argento's original is the version to start with. I think it's legendary. This was originally conceived as a story about a dance academy for children no older than 12. And Argento was told that a movie this violent would be banned if it featured children in the starring roles, which I don't disagree with. I don't think that it would ever have been released.
Yeah.
But Argento decided to make the girls 20 instead of 12, but he didn't rewrite the script, which explains why the characters often have this childlike dialogue. So I'm going to say that this is probably going to be something of a confusing watch for people who don't know a little bit of the backstory behind Suspiria. A lot of the dialogue will seem out of sync with the picture. That's because the cast was comprised of American, German, and Italian actors. Everybody spoke their native language during filming, and then the dialogue was dubbed in English for an American release.
That's how a lot of European countries have always, or well, at least up for for a long time, shot their movies. Which is why they always seemed like, and they're all of it's ADR'd.
Yes.
So it seems very stilted.
It does. It does. This is, it was very prevalent for Giallo-style movies.
Yeah. It's also a lot of the actors at the time hated it because they're like, I'm speaking English, this person over here is speaking Italian, and we're supposed to be acting against each other. It's like, well, we're not even having a conversation.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's stories from the production of this where, the two actors are speaking different languages, neither of them can understand each other, and one of them is tapping the other on the leg when it's their turn to start talking. And it's like, how the fuck do you act when that's how, the performance needs to unfold? But, yeah, so, Giallo-style movies, popular in 1970s Italy. Giallo translates to yellow, which is a reference to kind of these pulp detective novels that a lot of the movies were based on. They had yellow covers and spines. These books were often like murder mystery whodunits that featured long, drawn-out murder sequences. This is a giallo story with a supernatural element. But it was also conceived as like a dark fairy tale. Production design was influenced by Snow White. This is boldly colorful. I think beautifully colorful. Similar to Climax, this is kind of supposed to feel a little bit like a bad acid trip, which is perhaps the reason the Suspiria was featured alongside the TV in the opening to Climax. But, it's also very dreamlike. There's constant camera movement in Suspiria. It almost feels like you're kind of floating through this dance school at times. Even a lot of the murder sequences and deaths are shot in a way where, like, you're not in the eyes of a character. You're just, like, thrust into what's happening in the scene, and it feels kind of impossible. But it's a vibe, and and I like that about this. This is a movie that's supposed to elicit a feeling more than one that's necessarily trying to tell a compelling story or coherent narrative. But why did I pick this? Like I said, pretty personal pick for me because it exposed me to how expansive the horror genre really is. But for a movie that's supposed to elicit a feeling, I love the feeling that this movie gives me. It's scary. It's also hypnotic and beautiful. For me, this feels like remembering a dream, where it's not, it's not a true story there, but like
does everything it does with a lot of style.
Yes, 100%.
Panache.
Yeah. I also like that this is a story about witches. We don't get enough Sasquatch movies. We also don't get enough movies about witches.
Huh. I hadn't thought about that. Maybe that's true.
Yeah. So I also think you can't talk about Suspiria without discussing the Goblin soundtrack, which for me is fucking fabulous. Argento was part of the composition of this soundtrack and was really committed to the role it played in the film. He would blast this soundtrack over, the speakers while the movie was being shot, and the idea was getting the actors in the mood. I love this type of music in general, but I really love the way that it's used here. A lot of people found it jarring, and it turns them off of this movie. I'm curious how you responded to it.
I loved it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
This movie's great.
Yeah. Oh, good. I'm glad you thought so.
Are we going to bring up the elephant in the room?
The color?
No. Is there dancing in this movie?
There is. There's one dance sequence. Okay. There's one dance sequence.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Maybe I missed it. Okay.
Yeah, there's one dance sequence where they're rehearsing dancing, and it's brief.
In the background, maybe.
It does take place at a dance academy.
This is true.
So, the specter of dance looms large over this.
Dancing
this
is
film.
Hanging over this movie.
Yeah.
I don't know that we see a lot of dancing.
We don't see a lot of dancing. It's the briefest amount of dancing of all of the movies that we have tonight.
There's so much suggestion of dancing in this movie.
Yeah. I was going to get to that, but
we're constantly talking about like training and like you'll learn how we know how to dance, so we're gonna
Right. The remake features a lot more dancing, but there is a scene. There is one scene with dancing, so
I'll take your word for it.
It's there. This movie puts women front and center. I love that. There are really no male characters of any substance in this. It's really just kind of women engaging with women. That creates a pretty fascinating dynamic. I do love that. I do love the scene where all the students need to sleep in the dance studio after the maggots fall from the ceiling, because it's just a mesmerizing scene with these sheets up against the walls, and they're kind of bathed in color. I could talk forever about this film, but I'll bite my tongue so the customers can hopefully give this movie a watch. I think that if you haven't seen Suspiria, or even if you have, there isn't a better time to watch it than now, because it's been restored in gorgeous 4K. It looks beautiful, and it's one of my favorites of all time, especially within this genre. This comes in a 4.0 on Letterboxd. There's one review that I couldn't help but smile at. It was Andrea's review where she said, Dario Argento wants to fuck the primary colors, and you know what? I think we should let him.
Yeah.
It's such a colorful movie.
It's one of his best.
In a literal sense. So yeah, it's my final pick for dancing. Less on-screen dancing than other movies. But.
It's an absolutely great movie. If you're really looking for dancing in your movie, you'll get a little bit.
I'm curious, did you find this frightening?
No.
No? Yeah.
I mean, I don't get scared by a lot of movies.
Right.
Do I think it's like a scary movie? I don't think so. I think, missed the mark on the the tagline.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, it's great.
Tagline hasn't aged as well as the rest of the film.
Like, do you think it was scary in 1977? Probably not.
I don't know. It's gory.
Yeah,
but
that's probably what they were getting at.
Yeah. I don't know.
Didn't translate.
It doesn't necessarily relate to fright. Well, hey, once again, Rob and I thank you for stopping by Rewind Video. This week, the staff recommendation shelf is moving to a different beat with 6 movies that feature dancing. The films we chose are Girl Walk All Day, Climax, Swingers, Magic Mike, White Noise, and 1977's Suspiria.
Go to rewindvideopod.com to get on our mailing list or to get in touch with us here at the store. We like questions, comments, suggestions, either about the show or the store or movies.
Yes.
That you recommend to us or, that we've recommended to you.
As much as we like talking to each other, we also like talking to our customers.
Yeah, some of them.
Engage.
Yeah, some of our customers.
Some of our customers.
Do it over the internet, and so we can choose to engage back or not. And so don't forget, be kind, recommend.
That does it for this week's episode. Next time, tune in as we tackle competition.
Ooh.
We'll have 6 films to recommend, but of course, we're also interested in what you think, so don't hesitate to hit us up on social. In the meantime, feel free to stop by the counter for a movie to watch. We will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Hail Satan! Hail Satan dancing.